So close, I didn't know which button it was. Jeez. The House Appropriations Subcommittee on Human Services will come to order. Clerk, will you please take the roll?
Chair Roth,
Here.
Representative Kelly,
Here.
Representative Mueller, Representative Beeson,
Here.
Representative DeSana, Representative Edwards,
Here.
Representative Longshad.
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Today we will have a conversation about the foster care systems and kinship cares and other things and anything involved with that. So Amy from the DHHS will give us a informational, and certainly sorry, didn't know there were two of you today. We get double the fun. Oh, sorry, before we do that, we have a little business to take care of. Representative Beeson approves the minutes from the March 11th meeting. Being no objections, the minutes are approved. Thank you. Sorry about that. A little housekeeping. And go ahead when you're ready. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. As mentioned, my name's Amy Epke. I'm the Senior Deputy Director over Financial Operations, and I'm joined by Demetrius Starling, our Senior Deputy Director over Children's Services Administration. So today we're going to talk about three areas. In a minute, I'm going to turn it over to Demetrius to talk about foster care, the process, how it works, as well as Kinship, which is a really exciting initiative that we've got going on. And then also, I'm going to wrap up with what's included in the fiscal year 2026 budget in terms of keeping kids safe and the proposed investments. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Demetrius.
Thank you, Amy. Good afternoon, Chair Roth and esteemed board. Thank you first and foremost for allowing Amy and I to come in and talk about a paramount subject that is really close and dear to a lot of our hearts relative to, making sure that we keep kids safe in our communities and also find safe and suitable homes for them. So I am just going to first and foremost start off with a snapshot of what the child welfare process looks like in earnest. So our department receives around 175,000 CPS complaints on a annual basis through our centralized intake units. We have two offices located in Wayne County and also in Kent County, where we have 24-hour staff who take complaints for suspected child abuse or neglect. From there, CPS, the centralized intake folks will assign the CPS complaints on region perspective based off if it meets the criteria for an actual child abuse investigation. So our CPS investigators commence an investigation to again determine if child abuse or neglect occurred. And from there, it should be noted that during the course of the investigation, the CPS worker can either deny the case based off the fact that there's no merit to the allegations. We can open up a case for services, provision of services in the community, or we can file for removal of the child and children from the caretaker's home. But I really wanted to highlight the fact that MDHHS has a statutory obligation in some cases to file a petition. However, the courts are the ones that determine if a child actually remains in the home or it goes into foster care. So I really want to highlight that. And from there, the department makes a determination on if the best placement for that child is either in a kinship care placement, a licensed foster home, or a child caring institution. Right now in Michigan, we have around 10,000 children who are in foster care. And one of the great things I really want to highlight is that at the time, we have approximately 50% of our youth who are in kinship care. Now, if you go back in time, back in fiscal year 2019, we had over 17,000 kids who were in foster care, and not nearly as many kinship care placements at the time. So again, a child enters the foster care system with court orders the removal from their home. Foster care is provided through either a foster home, kinship care provider, or a congregate or child caring institution. And of course, the goal is to return the child to a safe and stable home once services have been provided. And this all comports with our Keeping Kids Safe agenda and our child welfare priorities in regards to keeping kids safe and keeping kids safely in our community. One thing I also want to note is that we've done a really fantastic job, both public and private, relative to our kids exiting foster care at a higher rate than they're actually entering into foster care. That's why you will continue to see the decline in foster care and the need for foster care utilization. Some of the things I really want to highlight in regards to recent foster care accomplishments, that we have removed transportation barriers for our youth in school by partnering with what we call Hop Skip Drive, which is a Uber-style transportation company with vetted drivers that allows students to remain in their existing school systems. And this is really important because, again, this comports with keeping kids safe in their communities. The opportunities that we have to keep kids safely in their communities attached to their schools, to their churches, to folks who are best situated to care for them is extremely important for our department. So having this transportation service available to us is extremely important. We've expedited information sharing regarding missing youth by partnering with the Michigan State Police, which increases our efficiency in locating youth. So right now, we are at the lowest rate in regards to missing youth in the state that we've been for years, less than 1%. The national average is 4%. So, kudos on the relationship and collaboration between our department and the Michigan State Police on that front. We've had enhanced preservation services, which has improved some of our placement selection, including family findings and also locating relatives when youth enter into foster care with targeted and aggressive recruitment strategies. So again, in tandem with amazing thought partners, such as some of the folks here in the gallery today, such as Samaritas, Judson, Orchards, and other groups have really done an amazing job in regards to preservation services and placement selection for our youth. In fiscal year 2024, we've licensed over 800 new foster homes, which is an amazing accomplishment. Given some of the financial, economic, and concrete issues and concerns that we see across our state, I think that's amazing to see that we have over 800 new homes in our foster home array. And also, we've increased our percentage of youth who are matched with an adoptive family to 90%, which really outpaces some of our measures in the past. One of the things I'm truly proud of, again, from both a public and private perspective, is the work around kinship care in Michigan. So Michigan was identified as the first state in the nation to be approved to implement separate licensing standards for kinship care providers. And as a department, we really strive to place children in the most family-like setting, making kinship care a priority for us all in the department. We know that children who have experienced trauma can benefit from the stability of living with relatives or other kinship care providers, and our data supports that children placed in kinship care have better placement stability than those in unrelated homes. Again, we've been recognized nationally as a Kin First state and considered leaders in the kinship space with other jurisdictions around the nation. So just a couple of things I really want to highlight in regards to some of that work. Again, we continue to strive to place children in the most family-like settings, which allows us to assess safety, financial, and supportive needs for our children in a more robust way. As a department, we have really expanded our opportunities or ways to support kinship care providers through some of our grants and also concrete economic supports to ensure the stability of the children and the well-being and care. And we've also developed the correct programming to provide necessary resources, advocacy, and awareness around the value of kinship care. So just some things I really also want to highlight around kinship accomplishments in Michigan. Outside of the fact that we were the first state to be recognized by the Secretary.
Could you say that again?
I'm so sorry. I hate when my watch does that. We were the first state in the nation to be approved. It sounds like a couple of you guys also go through that too. We were recognized by the Administration for Children and Families back in 2024 by Human Services Secretary Xavier Becerra and also U.S. Rep. Debbie Dingell for being the first state to accomplish such amazing goals. And also, we shifted our expectations and standards for kin several years ago to move away from some of those strict and rigid licensing standards. And we've modified our placement assessments to move away from some of those, antiquated ways of doing business. Besides that, we have formulated a Kinship Advisory Council that includes a very diverse group of community members who work on improving services and supports to kinship caregivers. We have a kinship navigation process which provides referral services through the MSU Kinship Care Resource Center. The navigation and referral services are available to all of our kinship caregivers across the state. We also have a partnership between our department and the new foster care to fund Kinship Connections, a pilot program focused on family finding and kinship care services. Back in 2021, we were awarded a grant through the Children's Bureau for some of our kinship care work. This funding established the Kin Care program. Kinder Cares is a partnership between MDHHS, Spalding, Macomb County, and they provide supports and services to kinship families and increases kinship families' access to vital supports and resources. We also have 16 new kinship support workers that are assigned to pilot counties throughout the state to be supportive staff members that assist families in getting assistance for concrete needs. We've also developed a regionalized foster care respite program to provide temporary, occasional relief to foster families and relative caregivers who are caring for children who are currently in foster care. Lastly, we have 11 family resource centers located throughout the state. The family resource centers are community-led, family-centered resource centers that partner with caregivers to deliver supports and services that respond to each family's individual needs and values. So we are very proud of the strides and the progress that we made in Michigan to address biases against kinship families and to increase the number of children placed with their relatives or close connections. Through continued innovation and collaboration with both public and private entities, we remain dedicated to supporting kinship caregivers and ensuring the stability and well-being of every child who comes into foster care. So with that, I will pass it over to Amy, who will go through our Keeping Kids Safe agenda and some of the budget increases.
Thank you, Demetrius. And when Demetrius's watch went off and said, "Can you repeat that again?" I think one of the things you'll hear us say over and over and over again is keeping kids safe. Keeping kids safe is absolutely a top priority for the department. And I cannot say enough about Demetrius's leadership and his role as a CSA Senior Deputy Director and the passion he brings to that area. What I'm going to talk about are 5 initiatives included in the fiscal year 2026 budget. So these are recommendations that are included in the executive budget to build on keeping kids safe. The first one is around kinship. As Demetrius mentioned, we have 10,000 children in foster care. Half of those are placed with kin, and we'd like to, or with relatives, and we want to make sure that we increase that as we go forward. And so what this investment would do is allow us to continue to match children with a family setting. And so this investment will allow additional staff time and efforts to make sure we're meeting the kids' needs and putting them in the best placement possible. The next initiative focuses on improving child placement and permanency. We recognize that as much as possible, we want to keep the kids in the home with their families. In some cases, that is not possible if there is a risk to the child. And so we do then need to have placement options available. What this proposal does is it allows us to create a pilot program around professional foster parents. So for those children with extremely complex behavioral and physical needs, we would set this program up where there would be 30 paid foster parents who would be paid an annual salary in order to take some of the complex situations of children. And so those placements would occur with those 30 foster parents. The next initiative builds on support for adopted children and their families. So we know in some cases when children are placed with an adopted family, there are additional services and challenges that need to be worked through. So this initiative provides behavioral and physical health services to the families of families with adopted children. The next initiative focuses on supporting individuals exiting the child welfare system. And what this means is currently federal benefits such as Social Security for children in foster care, right now, those funds go to the department to pay for services while the child is in foster care. This proposal would instead put general fund in place to support those services, and then the Social Security benefits would go into the child's account. And so that child would be set up with that funding for future use as they go forward. And then finally, our 5th initiative is around expanding family impact teams, and this one is extremely exciting for a number of reasons. We know that neglect and poverty are not the same thing. And we want to make sure that we are supporting families to be successful in keeping children with their families. We currently have family impact teams in 23 counties across the state, and what they do is they work with the families to help them get employment opportunities, help them get housing, help them get started to make sure that they can be successful and really support those children. With this proposal, what we would be doing is expanding statewide to all 83 counties, having those fit teams available to help those children and families make sure that they are set up for success. I think one of the other exciting things about this is cost neutral, as we would be taking our pathways to potential staff and transitioning them over to our fit teams. And so we're really excited about this initiative. And so with that, I know I went through that very quickly, but we do want to allow opportunity for questions and discussion. And so we appreciate your time this morning, and we look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it very much. Appreciate the overview. One question for me, and then I'll open up to the members. The kinship care that we got, Sterling talked about, that was for a specific kinship care. I mean, it was vetted. They had to be vetted by DHHS or maybe go into that. And if I remember right, if I read right, that doesn't mean I did, there was about a $30 million investment in the state. Am I correct on that? If not, maybe tell me what you saw. This is what I thought we saw. And I'm just wondering if that was put into like yearly service, because I see in the budget there's like a $10 million allocation for that. Maybe I'm maybe reading the wrong line, but just maybe if you could explain more about that, Amy.
Yeah, so the budget component would be a $24 million increase for fiscal year 2024 or 2026. Sorry, wrong year. So that is what is proposed in the executive budget. I'll let Demetrius talk a little bit about the vetting process.
Yeah, that too. I thought it was a federal grant that was given to us for about $30 million for the kinship care program. Did I misread that? Yeah, that was something that President Biden, I believe, had indicated that Michigan was going to receive. Maybe I misunderstood that.
We'll go back and double check. That doesn't sound, the 30 million does not sound familiar to me, but we'll go back and double check that.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
And as far as a process that's in place, so when the CPS worker does their initial investigation, one of the things that they do is they have an interview with the family, and there's a genogram that's completed. So it breaks down from great grandparents, grandparents, nieces, uncles, aunts, and from there they do extensive vetting. They do background checks. They do home assessments to ensure that the home is suitable for placement, and also have a really robust discussion with the caretakers to ensure that they're on board with that process as well.
And I'm doing this for my own knowledge, guys, not because there are obviously kinship people that are adopting or taking in relatives of their own that are going outside the actual vetting process that's also out there. I just want to make sure we're clear that there are certain ways to get funding and some that wouldn't necessarily receive that funding if you do it that way.
Right. Yeah. Are you speaking more of the informal kinship care process?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's something that I know our Kinship Care Council has spoken with myself and our staff around, making sure that we don't lose a focus on the folks who don't go through our child welfare systems. And myself, I am very familiar with the informal kinship care process because that's something that my family was a part of in the past. So, that's something we definitely want to lean into more and provide even additional support for those families as well.
I appreciate that. I know several of those too. Or anyway, Vice Chair Kelly, go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple questions here. Could you expand on the new definition of relative?
Yeah, so we expanded our definition to also incorporate fictive kin. So folks who are situated in your community that has a close connection to your family can also be viewed as kinship care providers. And when I spoke earlier about my history, that's kind of what I grew up off of. My family had issues in the past where fictive kin had to step in and play that role of an actual blood relative in certain situations. So kind of mimicking or creating that process in a formal way to make sure that they are also viewed as kinship care providers was extremely important for our department.
All right. And a second question is the proposed expand family impact teams from 42 to 150, and it's cost neutral because you're moving people away from family impact teams. What was the problem with family impact teams? Is that something you're abandoning or rename?
This would actually move the positions to the family impact teams away from the pathways to potentials.
I got
Yeah,
it.
and Pathways to Potential was primarily focused on making sure the kids were in school and focused on attendance at schools, which is still important, but the family impact teams overall would look at it more comprehensively. What does the family need? What are their needs with school? What are their needs in terms of housing? So it's just more of a comprehensive approach to make sure we're looking at all
Chronic
of it.
absenteeism is still a pretty big problem, particularly in urban settings.
Understand, yeah. And
We just don't think that's a focus anymore? Or?
it would still be a focus. I think the FIT teams are, again, looking at more of the comprehensive needs of the family. So not just looking at schools, but looking at the housing situation, looking at employment, looking at health benefits, looking at all in its entirety.
And education's kind of the bottom line of it all, isn't it?
Education is certainly one component of that.
I'd say the most important. Thank you.
Vice Chair Edwards.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As a former child welfare specialist that work with children in foster care, kids aged out of foster care, and adoptions, I think the department has come a very long way. I mean, you addressed the transportation barrier, replacing kids in a home with someone that they know instead of a complete stranger. But I do have a concern and a question. How many of the children who have been removed from their homes because of child abuse and neglect will have nowhere to go because child caring institutes were not funded in the proposed budget?
As far as, okay, I just want to make sure I'm understanding your question.
How many children would not have a place to go because of the proposed budget? Do you know? How many children do we have right now that are in fit the kin placements?
How many children are now in fictive care
Right.
placement? Okay, I can get that number for you. I don't have the actual.
Okay, thank you.
And one clarification I want to make too, the child care and institutions the funding will continue into 2026. So there was funding increase in 2025, and we did restructure the contracts with those CCIs. I believe we have CCI contracts for 560 kids. So that funding will maintain and be included in 2026 as well.
Representative Beeson.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for being here. My concern was the improving child safety placement and permanency. It looks like there's 22 FTEs, but something down the description that says required to be trained, licensed, and have a bachelor's degree to be available 24/7. Is there a reason why you have to have a bachelor's degree to be a good foster parent?
Yeah, so this was an initiative that was truly vetted out on many levels. So within our department, we also had federal guidance in regards to what jurisdictions saw as a need, a necessity for folks to have the acumen, the background, the education to care for some of our high acuity kid concerns and needs. So, not to dismiss folks who may have a high school diploma or, not have any kind of degree, but when it comes to really caring for those kids with extreme and adverse needs that we see with mental and behavioral health needs, folks who had the background and experience to meet those needs were truly necessary.
Okay.
Representative Longjohn.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for presenting today. I applaud you for progress. 17,000 out of 10,000. The kinship work is really compelling, and you're obviously got great ideas for future investments. My question is, given what we're looking at right now, whether it's from DC or here, what plans are you making in case the budget is actually cut?
So I can speak at a high level from the department overall. Our department's budget is 70% reliant on federal funding. Obviously, that's a significant portion of the federal funding. So we are in communication with our federal partners on what that might look like, but right now it's just a lot of unknowns. So I don't think we can give definitive answers in terms of what that would look like. But again, 70% of the MDHHS budget is reliant on federal funds.
Thank you, Representative. No more questions? I appreciate it, guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for the time.
Next, we will have Nicole Lawson, President CEO of Orchards Children's Services, and Kelsey Wistowski. Did I do that right? Was I close? Wisowski. Geez, sorry. And Program Officer and Placement Services, Orchard Children's Services. Ladies, thank you, and go ahead, and we'll ask questions afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm going to give just a brief overview of who Orchards is and how we interact with the state, and then Kelsey can give you all the details on our work specific to kinship and foster care. So Orchards Children's Services contracts with DHHS. Right now we have over 50 contracts with the state of Michigan, and we provide the full continuum of community-based care in the child welfare space. And so if we refer back to Director Starling's presentation, when he talked about CPS going in and investigating, and sometimes a child doesn't need to be removed and they make a referral for community supports, that is our family preservation service line, where we'll go in anywhere from 2, maybe up to 10 hours and really work to meet the unique and individual needs of that family. So that could be anything from increasing positive parent-child interaction to setting appropriate boundaries and limits to connecting a family with other community resources that they may need. And then certainly if a child does need to be removed for their own safety, we license foster homes. We do a lot of work in kinship with some of the pilot that Director Starling mentioned. And then unfortunately, if a child cannot be safely returned to their biological home or their family of origin, we also process adoptions and provide post-adoption supports and services to families throughout the entire state of Michigan. So we do have 5 locations, contracts that put us in every county throughout the state. And in 2024, we served about 10,000 kids across the state. So that is who Orchards is, and Kelsey's going to tell you a little bit specifically about our kinship program, and happy to take questions.
Good afternoon. I'm going to talk about Kinship Connections. It's a pilot program that was developed in partnership between the new foster care and MDHHS. It really has 2 main focuses. The first is, as was talked about by MDHHS, when CPS is petitioning the court for a child to enter foster care, there's a strong drive for us to find relatives and fictive kin. Kinship Connections is another entity that can help that conversation. Sometimes by the time a child is entering foster care, there's a breakdown between the CPS worker and the parent. There's not a lot of trust. And so a Kinship Connections worker is able to just focus with the parent on who do you trust, who do you know, who would be willing and able to take placement. So then we assess those individuals, work with the foster care agency in order to make a determination of if placement can occur. If that does occur, then we work to be able to support that placement. Foster care is difficult to navigate, even for the most seasoned of workers. When it's a relative that has no understanding of the foster care system, it can become really cumbersome. So we work with them to make sure that we're not just putting our rules and regulations on this family. We're working with them to make sure the child is safe, we're meeting our standards, and we're able to promote permanency as quickly as possible. So that Kinship Connections pilot started in June of 2022, and we've had some really great outcomes thus far. We've serviced 608 children for family finding, and of those children, on average, we're finding 32 or more connections for each individual child. 77% of those children have been placed with relatives or fictive kin. In terms of support, of the 62 families that we've been able to provide support for, only 4 children have had to get removed from those homes, so the rest have been able to maintain their placement. In terms of kind of what we found and just the work, I already talked about that when parents are working with the CPS system and when the children are entering foster care, it's a really traumatic time for them, and they need to be able to get support. If they are spending the majority of their time wondering who and how their children are being cared for, it takes away from them being able to focus on the reunification services foster care is trying to partner with in order to get the children home. So if we take away that barrier, if it's someone that they know and trust, we can more quickly get parents to be able to start working with us in order to get their kids home. For children, clearly we know that it's much easier for them to be able to go into someone's home that they've already been in before, someone that they know and trust and knows the big and little details of their life. So while they're going through foster care, which isn't by no means easy for anyone, but for children, if they at least someone knows their favorite bedtime story, it becomes a lot easier for them as well. When we're also engaging with individuals to be able to provide kinship care, we're also talking about how can they support the parents. Anyone that's a parent knows that having a strong support system is really what it takes in order for you to be successful as a parent. And so we're working with fictive kin and relatives to say, okay, if you're not eligible to be able to take placement, could you drive mom to treatment? Could you help being able to, supervise parenting time so that it just creates a stronger bond for the parent and a higher rate of success? While this Kinship Connections pilot is going to be ending as it stands right now in May, due to it not being financially stable to continue on as is, MDHHS did partner with us to really hone in on what are the parts that we want to focus on to be able to continue. And so a section of the work that we're doing is going to continue in a 1-year extension contract, which we are very grateful for. And we appreciate the ability to speak with you on the great work that we think Kinship Care is providing for our families in Michigan.
That's great. Thank you, ladies. And I didn't get to thank the department too. The kinship programs, getting people back, kids back with family in any way is a good thing and a priority we all should have. So I thank you for that. Any questions? Representative Beeson has a question.
It sounds like a great program you guys have. Do you guys have a prerequisite that they have to have a bachelor's degree to get that connection to the person?
For a kinship care provider? No.
Yes.
No.
Thank you.
Thank you, ladies. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
Next up, we're going to have Deb Frisbee come up. She is part of the kinship program that I talked about with. It's outside of the DHH's perspective right now, or I don't want to say this right. It's not one of the formal kinship care, but Deb has a great story to tell, and we want to hear from you. Thank you, Deb. Is your check the red button right in front of you? Make sure you got it.
Good afternoon, Chairman Roth and members of the committee. My name is Deb Frisbee, and I'm a kinship caregiver, a member of the steering member of the MKCC, the Michigan Kinship Care Coalition, and a former employee of the Adoptive Family Support Network. I reside in Thompsonville in Manistee County, and I want to thank Representative Roth for the invitation to testify today. In doing so, I hope to raise awareness for all kinship caregivers, and in particular for the hidden 50,000 children who are in Michigan families being raised outside of the formal child welfare system. I would also like to thank the Department of Health and Human Services for being that national leader in kinship care and for its ongoing work and commitment to ensure children remain with their families through kinship care, along with its vital work expanding these partnerships we heard about today with community organizations. And I'm thankful for continued funding of the Kinship Advisory Council and to be a part of the Gaps and Barriers Analysis Work Group inside of the Kinship Advisory Council. I'm sharing my story today to express the need of families outside of the formal child welfare system. It may surprise you, but it is estimated that over 50,000 Michigan children are living with kinship caregivers that are responsible for the emotional, physical, and financial needs as shown in the infographic before you. This data is presented by the United States Census Bureau, the Annie E. Casey Foundation, Kids Count Data Center, and the Adoption and Foster Care Analysis Reporting Systems. Many of these families struggle to raise their grandchildren, great-grandchildren, nieces, nephews, etc., of which the misinformation or lack of knowledge about the system is the least of those problems. I hope today you will recognize the inadvertent inequality that arises for kinship families who are raising kids through guardianships and power of attorneys with no legal standing at all compared to the help received in foster care. My family's kinship journey started in April of 2003, when our daughter, then living in Florida, moved back home with my husband and I. She had a 3-year-old boy named Richard and was 6 months pregnant. Riley was born 3 months later in July. Things were going smoothly for a few months, but deteriorated quickly. Our daughter stayed away from home for days, leaving the children with us and leaving us unaware of where she was. By December, we learned that she was using drugs. Because of our deep concern for the children, we told her that it was fine to leave the children with us, but that she would have to move out, which she did. Honestly, I'm not sure where I learned that I could petition the court for full guardianship, but we did, and guardianship was granted. For the next 3 years, we had annual meetings with a caseworker in Kent County Probate Court. It felt good to have someone to talk to about how our family was doing and how the parents of the children were doing, as well as having someone answer the many questions we had. This same person would meet with our daughter. After 3 years, it was clear our daughter could not safely parent the children, so we hired an attorney to move to adoption. Permanency was important to me for the sake of the children, and at that time, I was also a CASA volunteer. You see, if you remain in a guardianship, the parents can petition the court at any time to terminate your guardianship, and I lived in fear that that would happen. In our case, one parent was incarcerated and the other signed off their rights, avoiding a trial for the termination of parental rights. At the time of adoption, the children were 3 and 6. I would like to note that not many courts have staff to do that anymore. In fact, in my dual county, the guardian is sent a form labeled PC 654, which provides for an annual review. Nowhere on that form does it ask about the needs of the kinship caregiver, and there are no meetings with staff that follow the submission of that form. For several years, our family was doing okay, and I say that loosely, but the older our son got, and as time progressed, we were seeing difficulties in his learning, emerging as severe ADHD, impulsivity, and violent mood swings mirroring oppositional defiant disorder. We knew something was seriously wrong. When he turned 13, I called Bethany Christian Post-Adopt Services for help. I needed resources in case management, but I was met with, "I'm sorry, we can't help you. You did not adopt from foster care." So I continued to look for resources and somehow found my way to Easter Seals. They were the first resource to say they could help. They arranged an appointment at the Southwest Michigan's Children's Trauma Assessment Center, where my son was diagnosed with static encephalopathy. That's brain damage, and it's better known as fetal alcohol syndrome. From there, we saw many psychiatrists, counselors, tried medications, DBT, IEPs, you name it, we did it. Through all of this, I became a fierce advocate for him in school. On the outside, he looked perfectly normal, but his behavior certainly was not. He was not liked by his school principal, and by the time he was 17 in his senior year, he ended up in county jail. I continued to advocate for his free and public education, and am proud to say he successfully earned his diploma while in jail. Our son is now 24 and still struggles to this day with homelessness. He's in and out of jail and in and out of rehabs. I do want to thank those legislators who have worked tirelessly on our mental health crisis. About a month ago, we were able to walk him into the new Network 180's Behavioral Health Crisis Center in Grand Rapids, where after 72 hours he was stabilized and approved for rehab and sent home with us with a safety plan until a bed opened. Thank you so much. Had he not had access to the center, he may not be with us. Children come into kinship care outside of the formal child welfare system due to the death of a parent, substance abuse or addiction, incarceration, and diversion in many other ways. Many times these kinship families make complex decisions on the spot or under duress. They don't come into the experience with the expertise to consider the lifelong and legal ramifications of raising a child or multiple children. These kinship caregivers have stepped up to the plate, saving the state billions of dollars and doing the same thing a foster parent does. I tell this story to show you that I am only one of the thousands of families that required some support on that journey. Support that is only available through the formal child welfare system. Those outside of the system either find a way to pay for these services on their own or sometimes have to go without. Kinship families outside the child welfare system are actually eligible for the TANF child-only grant, and sometimes referred to as the ineligible grantee award, which is based on the child's income and not the caregiver's. But less than 5% of them receive this small amount of money. Why? Could it be that no one has told them? When I was working as a parent consultant with the Adoptive Family Support Network, I found this was often the case. Or could it be because TANF requires child support from the child's parent, which has to be paid back to the state and creates a barrier for the parent and also creates contention with a kinship caregiver. Child support enforcement can be waived in child welfare cases if it is a barrier to reunification, but this option is not available to families seeking TANF child-only grant. So how can we make things better for these families? First, we must do a better job to locate and identify kinship caregivers outside of the formal child welfare system. Secondly, we need to engage with them, to learn what they need, and to connect them to available resources. In my case, our family was engaged through the court system up to adoption, which helped tremendously. And after adoption, I was still a kinship caregiver, but I could no longer be identified as one. I became an adoptive parent. We truly are a hidden sector of people. Kinship caregivers need guidance and clear understanding of the various care structures so that they can make the best decisions for their families. One solution to ensuring that kinship caregivers outside of the formal child welfare are best able to provide for their children is to guide them through the process, whether that case be in the formal child welfare system or outside the system through guardianship or power of attorney. That point of contact should be made available wherever that case begins, in court or before the department's Child Protective Services. Based on my experience, CPS caseworkers who are experienced with kinship families are uniquely able to advise them about accessing services such as mental health, TANF dollars, food stamps, and other eligible support for the family or child alone. I urge the department's officials to provide professional staff development to this unique population and assign these families a caseworker who have already developed this expertise. The department recently awarded a contract for a gaps and barriers study to determine what the hidden 50,000 kinship families and children need to be safe and secure. And I applaud these efforts and hope the department uses this information to design flexible strategies specifically for kinship families not in the formal welfare system. Most of these families do not need or want to be in the formal child welfare care system. But we need access to concrete financial support and services on occasion. Most of the supports are not located in child welfare, but in other parts of the Department of Health and Human Services. These include, but are not limited to TANF, child care, mental health, substance abuse treatment, waiver of child support enforcement, legal services, domestic violence services, housing utilities support, food and nutrition service, special education, and medical care. These services already exist, but they seldom are focused on the unique needs of kinship families. In fact, many make it very difficult, if not impossible, for kinship families to access them. Little effort of training goes into helping these programs and staff to competently understand and support kinship family issues. Although the department has many great projects and pilots to strengthen families, few, if any, specifically look at how these programs are structured or how they place unnecessary barriers on kinship families to access them. We encourage you and the department to continue your efforts to eliminate the gaps and barriers in existing services. We know we all share the same goal, to ensure that all children grow up happy, healthy, and able to thrive in society. When kinship families are not able to keep kids safe and healthy, though, we will all have a much higher price to pay.
Thank you, Deb, very much for telling your story. Maybe give us just a little bit of financial, what it does financially to some of these folks that take in their own relatives.
Well, a lot of the grandparents who are taking kids in are maybe close to retirement. I've been living on a fixed income for many years, and so financially, it's difficult. They like I said in this testimony, they are eligible for TANF, but so few know about it or how to access it. A lot of things are done online. We're grandparents. We're not all up on technology. So, I have to assist a lot. I assisted a lot of families when I was working for the Adoptive Support Network to go through those forms and what it looks like. Because in those forms, it does ask for your income but it's not based on your income. So that, and I tell the people that, but that's so confusing to them. Well, then why do I have to fill that out? You know, so it's so complex. It would just take, you know, and the department knows how complex it is too, and so that's why you know, they're working with the Kinship Advisory Council, which I appreciate.
Any questions? No? Beeson? You good? Guys. Thank you, Deb. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Really appreciate it. Next, we're going to have Dave Morin, from CEO of Samaritas, and Rachel Sykes, Vice President of Family Services of Samaritas. Come on up, folks. You got a good 15 minutes or so here. Thank you, and begin when you're ready. Make sure the little red light's on. Thank you.
Great. Good afternoon, everybody. Chairman and members of the committee, thank you for having us here today. I'd like to introduce Samaritas to all of you, and Rachel will talk in much more detail about how we serve those in this system. So Samaritas has been serving Michigan for 91 years. Last year, we served over 33,000 individuals across virtually every county in the Lower Peninsula. And we do that through multiple areas of impact that include foster care and preservation and adoption. It includes mental health services and substance use disorder services. We provide resettlement services to refugees that come to Michigan. And we also provide affordable housing and shelters for families that are in a state of homelessness in Metro Detroit. Rachel.
All right. I too just want to thank all of you for joining this committee and Chair Roth for inviting us this morning. I wanted to say hello to my representatives. So I live in Kalamazoo. Representative Long John, love to speak more with you. And Representative Edwards, your work in the system, I know that prepared you well for this committee. So as you're learning about this, I'm reiterating a bit of what you've already heard today from private agency providers with orchards. I really appreciated what Deb had to bring as a kinship care provider. And I really want to urge all of you to protect, direct, and prioritize this funding. I do recall Representative Roth hearing about the $30 million coming from the federal government, and that was hailed in an article as one of the largest increases ever in decades for these services. $30 million, are we serious? That is really not enough. We really have to prioritize our children and our families in these communities. And what happens when we prioritize this is we build our communities. So these children are your children. So when I come to speak, I remind us all that when children are wards of the state in the child welfare system, we are responsible for them as a community, always, but you all are responsible for them in your seats. And that is a really high responsibility. What we can do when we do this well is we can create a lot of safety and well-being where the kids are no longer struggling to get to school, to your point, Representative. That is critical and important for them to be there for education. Representative Kelly, I know that was actually your comment. So we are very invested at Samaritas in an array of services, as Dave mentioned. We have increased our services in family preservation. Those services, as you heard from our friends at Orchards, are very critical to stabilizing and keeping families intact in the first place. If we can do that, and we have young parents out there who are struggling with a lot of financial pressures, they're struggling with housing insecurity, they're struggling with mental health, they're struggling with employment instability, they're struggling with domestic violence, they're struggling with substance use as a result of these stressors. And the children within these homes aren't getting their needs met, right? So we need to get in there and help these parents to be stabilized. We need to help their community and their grandparents to be with them during that stage so that that stage doesn't get even further down the road to where we have more kinship grandparents that are incurring the stress without the resources, right? They need those resources to be able to care for our children. So again, just reiterating how important that is. So at Samaritas, we did move services to the front end. The preservation services start keeping those families intact. What we really understand well, because we've been doing services for 91 years, is we still have to support the foster care services. So when the children need us because abuse or neglect is occurring or has proven to have occurred, and we need to have a safe place for those kids, we have to protect the funding to keep that very strong. And if we can reduce that, great, but we have to have that very stable and strong. And what's happened over time is on that continuum, we're building out services around foster care, before foster care, after foster care, but we are forgetting at times that foster care has to maintain a level of funding so that we can keep a workforce in place that is able to manage the needs that are happening there and get kids moving through to the right places. The pieces that we struggle most with are the funding has been stagnant often. So we often come to the table every year and say, please look at the funding. Please look at how that funding has become stagnant. We have a lot of increasing costs, and when we build in the front end, which is what we should do, we are taking care of the low-risk cases. Those low-risk cases, keeping families intact, fantastic. But then the high-risk children are the high acuity children in the high-risk cases where very serious circumstances are happening are what now the foster care service line and the workforce there are dealing with. And they are struggling to be able to do that on the same budget that they did it for decades. For 3 years ago, they can't keep up with inflation. We can't keep up with the pay for the workforce. And we want to be able to partner and make this work. It's going to require that we have to innovate how the system works. We have to be really smart and work together and find ways that we can move the system around in a way where we're not funding something that isn't working. We're finding ways that we can get the right amount of funding prioritized, and our kids are going to come out better for it. We cannot allow our kids to get through that continuum and be worse on the other side than they started. So we would love to spend time with you. We have a lot of experience with these services. We would love to give you our information, and we will come and talk to you at any point. And please keep us informed. I know you're doing this incredible good work. You have really hard decisions to make. There's a lot of things that need funding, but our community and building our community is going to create that stability that is needed, and it's going to help every single area that these families and kids touch. So thank you for your time today, and we appreciate any invitation that you might have for us in the future.
Well, thank you, and I'm sure all the members would love to meet up with you and talk to you more.
Thank you.
I'm hearing more and more from multiple groups. Obviously, the acuity is going way up.
Absolutely.
And can you give any kind of, I hate to say, you're going to be able to pick one thing out, right? That you're seeing, is it behavioral, physical, both, abuse? What are the main things you're seeing in the acuities that are going up?
Yeah, so what we're seeing, it kind of goes back to we're handling the situations that are more low risk. But what we are seeing is we have children now who have experienced more trauma. They've experienced abuse and neglect that is more egregious, right? We're trying to say we can help you with this. And so we have a lot of students right now that you're hearing about that are expressing that there's a lot of mental health concerns. There's depression, there's anxiety. There's a lot more youth out there that are now acting out. And when you put a youth in that environment where they have more instability, where they're not sure, where is my community? Where is my family? Am I okay right now? What's going to happen next? Then we actually cause more of that mental health instability to happen. So if we can't stabilize those placements and kids are moving into other placements and the system isn't working for them, that just exasperates that mental health piece that you're seeing and hearing about from all of your constituents and families right now whose kids are not in foster care. It is just creating an environment where they're struggling to just thrive, much less be able to succeed in the things in life that they want to get to, that normal kids get to do, right? Achieving things at school, going to prom, joining that basketball team, being able to do all those types of life activities when they're really, a lot of them are experiencing mental health in much greater ways now than they were before.
Any questions? Maybe I could ask one more.
Sure.
So we are seeing maybe numbers come down a little bit in placements, more with home rather than the foster care system directly. But is that some of those are still in the foster care system, or are we seeing more acute issues with them, with the children in there? Would that be a fair statement or not necessarily?
Okay, so there are still 10,000 youth. This is the number you were looking
Right.
for. So we went from 17,000 youth, as Director Starling mentioned, down to 10,000 in a pretty quick period of time. Our largest drop that occurred was during the pandemic when we did rapid reunification and we got kids home. So we looked at, could we get low risk situations taken care of, support those families and get them home. And there has been a lot of work done to be able to keep that number a little bit lower. But if you look at the numbers, it definitely is stabilizing. And so I know some of you have seen the reports coming in about that, looking at caseload. That number is stabilizing right around the 10,000 because it's not necessarily about sorting out that piece of the risk. It's that we have to be available for that number of kids. We can continue to work through that and find ways to help support and bring the number down. But realistically, we need to keep some portion of this foster care program operating at a very strong level to manage where we're leveling that out right now.
Well, thank you very much. Really appreciate your testimony and your conversation, and meet up with our members and talk more. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Okay.
Do we have any excused members? Not really. They all showed up at one time. The House Appropriations Subcommittee on Human Service will end. Adjourn, sorry.